Hey, this show is made possible by Key Person of Influence, which is a 40-week accelerator program designed to make you more visible, more valuable, and more connected in your industry. You can grab a free hard copy of their New York Times bestseller, and I've got to tell you, it's a good read, over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. We're also lovingly supported by Web Central, who are creators of beautifully effective websites and online marketing programs for small businesses. You can grab an exclusive listener deal, there's 3 of them, over at webcentral.com.au/Timbo. Imagine if your dad bought an old rundown airport in a major city and then gave you the opportunity to turn it into a world-class airport, one that people love going to, one that gets talked about internationally, and one that is incredibly user-friendly. Well, that's exactly what happened to today's guest. And boy, oh boy, does he share some marketing gold.
Yeah, I said, welcome to a small business marketing show, where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Timbo Reid.
And welcome back to another episode of Australia's #1 marketing show. I'm your host, Timbo Reid. You? Infinitely more importantly, you're a motivated business owner and you are ready to crank out some great marketing to build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it deserves to be. Big show today. We are joined by Stephen Byron, whose family own Canberra Airport. Now, don't think for a minute that you have nothing to learn from a bloke whose family owns a large airport, as my chat with Stephen is basically a masterclass on how to create a user-friendly experience for your customers. Some really great insights Stephen shares very shortly. I also share another low-cost marketing idea for you to implement immediately in our favourite segment, What Have You Got to Lose? I'll give you a hint. Today's idea is all about spying on your prospects. Should that be allowed? You'll find out very shortly. And we revisit a past episode in which I caught up with Jim, that is Jim Pinman, from that legendary Aussie brand Jim's Mowing. Hey team, as per usual, there is marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Now, coming up, I share another easy-to-implement marketing idea in What Have We Got to Lose? But for now, allow me to introduce you to Stephen Byron, who has been the Managing Director of Canberra Airport since his family bought it back in 1998. Now, back then, as Stephen describes, the airport was a fairly unimpressive place, certainly not doing justice to Australia's capital city. Since then, Stephen has led a transformation of Canberra Airport, spending around a lazy $2 billion, that's with a B, not an M, in airport infrastructure, a new terminal, a retail precinct, and 3 business parks which accommodate more than 10,000 workers. Pretty amazing business, right? Now, you might be thinking, what can I, the small business owner, learn from someone who owns a big airport? Well, I'm going to tell you, plenty. What I love about Stephen's story is the lengths he and his team have gone to in identifying what annoys people about airports, then set about solving each and every one of them in the new design. Now, this is quite simply a story about how to create user-friendly products, services, and customer experiences. I think you're going to love it, guys. I started off by asking Stephen, why am I always the guy who gets asked to do the explosive test after the security screening?
There is a reason for that, and that is that the security guys have an inherent bias to attract people who aren't likely to argue with them or pick on them. So you're being chosen because you've got a good-looking, nice, friendly face.
Isn't that interesting? Goodness me, I would have thought I'd be the opposite, 6'4" and imposing, but clearly they can see beyond my height.
They can. Interestingly enough, about 4 weeks ago they changed it, so now it is completely random. So there's a process that identifies people on random number, and the security screener now doesn't have the choice, and they have to select the person that's been randomly chosen. So it's a much better process. And
I do feel sorry for those guys and girls because they do get a bit of heat. It's that silent treatment, when you're asked to come over and do that test. It's like, really? Here we go.
It's all fine when we've got time, but when we're running late, it's a bit of a drama, isn't it?
Now, Stephen, at some point prior to owning Canberra Airport, your family must have owned a small business. In the spirit of this show, what was that business?
Well, my father owned a property trust business and was one of the first property trusts listed on the stock exchange in 1982, and it was a very small business of only $5 million then, and it grew. But that was a business capital property trust that he and his brother George Snow had, and they sold that business in 1996.
Freeing up a few dollars to build an airport.
Well, it did, and they had been watching the then Labor government's plan to privatise the Australian airports, and had identified that the Canberra airport would be something special. And it was interesting that it was 1998 when Canberra airport was sold, and the Howard government had come in, and the Costello budget cuts had come through. So Canberra was in a very negative place, on a downward spiral when this asset was sold, and our family decided that we'd take a longer-term view and try and purchase it and turn it into something better.
Paint a picture for us, because we've got, obviously, listeners from all over Australia and the world. What was Canberra Airport like prior to you getting hold of it?
Well, you'd have to say it was pretty run down and neglected. It had been starved of capital under a government ownership model. The political seats in Canberra are very safe Labor seats, so we never got the new terminal. In fact, I think Fraser gave our terminal that was going to come in 81 to Launceston in a marginal election campaign. So we had basically a tin shed, and we also had a sheep paddock, and we did, because the area south of the terminal that is now Brindabella Business Park was a sheep paddock. There were sheep grazing there, and when we said to the farmer that we'd bought the place and we're going to build a business park, he said, "That's fine, I've heard this sort of stuff before. Give me a call in 6 months so I'll bring the sheep back."
I'll buy it back off you for a peppercorn rent.
Yeah, that's right. But it was a rundown. I mean, even the runways were pretty under strength. They were only able to handle the old 737s, which are lighter than the new 737s. So, basically every bit of the infrastructure we had to do a do-over on, and obviously that took us some time to sort of work our way through the process.
It's an undertaking I can't even start to get my head around. My son, who did business management in final year of school a couple of years ago, we used to play a game where we'd drive around and he'd point at businesses and he'd say, "Dad, how does that business make money?" And more often than not, I couldn't answer him. When you're talking about an airport, those infrastructure costs, I mean, I can't even imagine. I think a number's been quoted of $2 billion is what you've put into it, but where do you start and say, okay, we are going to build an airport, we've got to build runways and terminals, and it just seems enormous.
Well, I think where we started was where we almost gave up in the first year, because in those days Ansett and Qantas owned their own terminals, so we had no control or say in those. And we went on a tour of the smaller airports in Europe, where the airports were things of great national pride, and it was recognised the importance they provide in stimulating the local economy and growing tourism and travel and all that stuff. And we came back and we almost were flummoxed and said, there is no way we can get the capital together to build a terminal befitting of Australia's national capital. And Terry said, can we almost give it back and get our money back that we paid for it? But of course you couldn't.
Did he really say that?
He honestly said that, and he didn't just say it. He sort of meant it, knowing that it was impossible. But he did mean, how do we get out of this? Because we can't do what I want to do. He wanted to build the best small airport in Australia in the world, and that tour gave him that ambition. even more clearly than ever. But it also said to us, how do you do it when the airlines were doing it so tough, when there was so much volatility in aviation? How do you build a business to invest in aviation infrastructure when they're volatile?
Just hold that thought. Terry, I don't know your father, but I'm guessing he would be, describe him, tough, belligerent. I don't know what's the
a classic small businessman that is driven to achieve the things that he wants to achieve. He's a big dreamer for a small businessman.
Yeah, right.
And you know how he achieves his dreams is to dream the outcome and then try and find the pathway to get there and be doggedly pursue it.
So when he's
been a great driver.
When he said we could almost ring the farmer up and hand it back, that's a big statement coming from a man like that. Were you shocked?
Oh, no, because I understood exactly what he was saying and feeling. And it was, in fact, ring the federal government back and say, listen, you do this. This is sort of almost impossible to get to where we want to get to. And with so few tools in our hands, you know, not even really owning the terminal. We just had a land lease over the terminal to Qantas and to Ansett, and very little ability to control anything, very little ability to have a new airline or a low-cost airline come into Australia or Canberra. We were just, you know, not in charge of our destiny and not knowing how we could do anything.
So because you can't give the land, well, you could sell the land, but, you know, so where was the turning point that said, okay, we're in, we are in?
Well, we said what we've got to try and do is develop another income stream that's independent of the aviation risks and that part of the economy, as it were. So we hit on this thing of developing a business park that would have income from office style or even initially we thought industrial style property tenants that would have 5 or 10 year leases that would be independent of airlines going broke or all of the challenges. And really that was part of what we spent the first 5 years trying to do whilst developing the plans and ambitions and designs for a terminal. We spent the first period of time building what has become Brindabella Business Park, which is leverages off the airport and the economic activity here. It leverages off the defence and aerospace industries and then the IT industries, and they're things that Canberra is very, very strong on. And we've now got, you know, some of the best corporates in Australia and indeed the world, the Raytheons, the Ciscos, the NECs, but in Australia, the KPMGs, Accentures and Deloittes.
Did that did that bankroll the building of Canberra Airport?
It did over time, and it gave us what we say are the financial lungs to then be able to go to the banks and say, now we want to fund building a terminal and fund building a new runway and an extended runway and strengthened runway, and really the complete makeover of the aviation infrastructure.
There must have been a few, maybe haters is the wrong word, but a lot of people looking on, standing behind that farmer going, these guys are fools.
Yeah, there were, and you know, in a what was then a smaller town, Canberra's a much more thriving business centre. There were the sort of the competitive jealousies, which if you like, are just good old-fashioned businesses not liking competition, and we were delivering competition in some part because we were delivering something that was new, very vibrant, creative architectural buildings set in a wonderful landscape setting, taking great responsibility for the amenity between the buildings and the maintenance of the landscape, so that people who came to work were really inspired by being here. We built the first 5-star Green Star building, and my brother Tom Snow led that. But that was the first one built not just in Canberra but in Australia, and that helped us stamp the quality of what we were doing. And I suppose it's one of Terry's overarching philosophies that the quality wins out in the end, and it particularly overcomes the critics. If you do the very best, then eventually the critics don't have anything to stand on.
Well, let's talk about quality because it's a pretty heated topic, airports. I went out onto this show's Facebook a couple of days ago, Stephen, and said I'm interviewing a fellow whose family have built an airport. I didn't say which one. And I just asked a simple question, what annoys you about going to an airport? I didn't realise just how opinionated and how much of a hot topic it was. Because, and I think you can always judge it by the amount of response you get on Facebook. It's a good barometer for how people are feeling. And I got a lot of responses. And nothing will surprise you, from queues to time it takes to get through the scanners, to the cost of parking, to the cost of food, to the low quality of the food, to the expensive duty-free, to the dodgy toilets, to the way people queue at the luggage carousel, on and on and on it goes. Quite heated. So tell me, for you, because Canberra Airport has challenged all these things and solved a lot of them, what's the critical factor or process that you went through in building an airport that people love to go to?
I suppose the first thing, before I get exactly to the people and the customers that we're thinking about, is we did decide to start again, because I think the big problem that so many airports in Australia or around the world have is that they've inherited something that's not good enough or been incrementally done, and the piece-by-piece additions have been largely, have elements of dysfunction that reflect historical decisions of 20, 30 years ago, even before the airports were privatised. So we decided that we would do it all brand new, and it wasn't easy building a brand new terminal and keep the current one going, particularly as we decided to do it in the same spot. But we said we're going to build something new. And the first principle we said was, well, the most important thing for a traveller is to make sure they get their flight and they don't miss it, and for the planes to be on time and it to be fast, friendly and easy. So that really culminated in the design that involved a roadway that comes up to the front of the terminal where you can see the terminal, so there's no lack of clarity when you're driving to the airport. And then there's no pedestrian crossings that slow you down, because, even if you're not running late, sooner or later those pedestrian crossings end up putting you in a running late position and the stress starts. So we got rid of that, and our car parks are on the side, and you can enter the car parks independently of the cars that are being dropped off to drop people off with taxis and the like. You can then come into the terminal, and we had a big central atrium, and we knew that security was going to be the big thing. It was obviously post September 11 from New York. So security was the next key piece to remove the stress and remove the queues. So as well as putting in quite a number of lanes and a nice open area atrium to house it in, we said that our staff, who are security contractors first and foremost, they could also be helpful and friendly. So we dressed them in soft green uniforms rather than military police-style uniforms, and we put on their back, "Here to help." And that's a culture that goes through all of our staff, but also all of the people that are contractors in the terminal, whether it's cleaners or security, that, sometimes people don't need a lot of help. They just have a tiny question and they want a tiny answer. But the culture of having a smile on your face and being open to someone asking a question really infects part of what we offer here. And then you touched on the toilets. For us, the toilet experience is very, very important. It's not only got to be clean, it's got to be smart. Our architects and in-house guys worked on making sure that, there were minimum touch points and you hardly have to touch anything, and that you can easily take your bag in or out of the bathroom with you. And I think people realise that if you have a toilet like that, one that's not dirty and so on and so forth, that it reflects an owner that is caring for the outcome. Yeah.
As you're going through all this, and I'm thinking about business owners that are listening who also need to make significant changes in their business, you had the luxury, I think, at two levels, and correct me if I'm wrong, the existing airport kind of had to be pulled down. You couldn't build around it. And secondly, you had the funding to do what you've been able to do, I'm guessing. Others don't have the luxury.
And part of that was outlook.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Part of that was outlook in terms of, why did we have the funding and why didn't we take short-term economic return decisions? And part of it was that we're building an intergenerational business to be long-term owners. So we're not sort of short-term developers or needing short-term returns for this year's quarterly superannuation report. And indeed, we've essentially very rarely taken any dividends out of the business. We've left and reinvested, and that's how, if you like, the cash flow has always worked, is that whenever we've been spending and whenever we've been talking to the banks about needing to borrow money, we say, well, at least half of this is going to be funded by the existing cash flow of the business, because we're not going to draw a dividend.
Right.
And that's exactly what small business owners do. So obviously we're a larger business now, but we treat ourselves as a small family company in our culture and outlook. It also goes to that same issue of customer service. We live and breathe in the community, as do our staff, and that means that it's easy for us to think like customers, and it's easy for us to make sure that we care about the little things that matter, and that it's worth spending the money to get those smaller things right. And I think that is that small business mentality.
Okay, so there's so much there. Brilliant, brilliant. By the way, listeners, I'm speaking to Stephen Byron, who is the Managing Director of Canberra Airport and whose family also happen to build and own it. So the big lesson there is, like, there's too much short-term thinking. We need to take a longer approach, and that way our mindset changes as to what we can and can't do.
Certainly.
The second thing is, how do you are a big business now? I don't know what's the terminology. You have a market capitalisation, or put size around it, because my question is, how do you remain small business minded? I don't get that.
Well, we have 100 staff, and we've grown to that level from what was essentially probably 25 staff when we started 18 years ago. But each member of our staff, no matter whether they're long-term senior managers or brand new staff who've just joined our business, understand our culture and values that essentially revolve around treating the place as their own, and the money in the business and the customer service in their business as being their own.
How does that physically play out beyond lip service? Because I love the fact that you've got Here to Help on the back of their uniforms, but is there a weekly meeting? Are there KPIs? Are there awards? What do you do to make sure that's real and not just lip service?
I almost don't know, and as you started asking the question, don't quite know, why does it translate, and why isn't it just words or meetings talking about team chance? I suppose it's the fact that we also empower our staff, and we back them, we don't criticise them, and like all of us, sometimes mistakes are made, but the people that, when we do that, whether it's me or anyone else in the business, you make a mistake, you see it and you take responsibility for it, you fix it, you ask for help. And so we're interested in doing all of that. So it's a culture where there is responsibility without blame, but there is accountability to fix the issues that need to be fixed, and a deep-seated desire to do that and to serve our customers. It's also an aspect. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, I wonder too whether, if I can answer my own question for you, you might not see it, but being a family business, there's something special about family businesses. I worked for one for about 10 years, and I've worked for businesses, large corporates that aren't family, and there is a distinct difference, and it's actually hard to put your finger on. There's almost a love and a care that doesn't exist in a non-family business.
I think that is right, and I think that goes to the level of respect that is between all of the people that work here, is seeing that sort of family and personal meaningfulness, but it's also returned, and of course the staff are treated as if they're family, and they are part of this family. Funnily enough, you spend probably more time with your work family than you do with your home family. So of course they're family, and it is a shared project. It is, the desire to deliver the sort of quality of service we do day in, day out is a shared project, and people support each other in doing that, and equally share the success that comes along with delivering that.
I just want to go back to the conversation we were having around creating a user-friendly airport and an experience that people love to be a part of. Because, again, there's a lot of business owners listening who want to create a more user-friendly experience in their business. Can you just, other things that you did and how you identified them?
I think the main thing we've always taken the philosophy that we're in a service business, and people say, an airport's an infrastructure asset or an infrastructure business. We're a service business just like a hotel. So we look at each part of the process through the eyes of the customer, because we live and breathe it. You asked, do we have KPIs on queues or on stuff? Well, we don't, because we just make sure that we live and breathe it and focus on it, and look at it through the eyes of the customer. So every bit of, even the bathroom experience, and where you go from washing your hands to drying your hands to then getting your bag to walk out, and where you put your bag in the cubicle, all of those elements we looked at exactly through the eyes of the customer. So at the end of the day, everything does come back to the customer, and what's important to them is obvious to us, because we live it just as they live it.
Love it. Was there a little bugbear of yours that you actually eyeballed the architect and said, listen, I hate this about airports, you must do this? I mean,
there were a few, and I can't hit the nail on the head on one of them, but one that's a bit more general, but is our taxi rank. And it is a frustration in Canberra that sometimes we don't have enough taxis, and they're busy in the rest of the city, so it takes a little bit of time. So we said, well, how do we solve that problem? Well, let's have an indoor taxi rank, because in the middle of summer it can be damn hot, and on a cold, breezy June evening, it can be a bit cold. So we said, let's have an indoor taxi rank. And I mean, I think we all sweated on how to make that work, and it was that same thing of the little incremental elements of how to make that work, and yet transition from the inside to the outside, and yet deliver the sort of experience that fixed up what is a problem. And I suppose part of customer service is making the main things, the good things, work and work well and effectively, but then honing in on what are the things that aren't right and do cause people aggravation, and going the extra mile on that.
You're one of the first airports with an Uber lounge?
We are. So we've got an arrangement with Uber that encourages Uber to use the airport and encourages people to use Uber.
Love it.
We have a dedicated Uber pickup lounge, and that helps us solve that problem as well. And some people like Uber, and we should help them use it, and some people don't need or don't want to use it, and that's fine as well, and we should keep working on making our taxi service better.
Did you break any new ground? I mean, I don't know how many new airports are built around the world each year. I'm guessing not many. Is there anything in particular, Stephen, where you have done it for the first time?
There were a whole range of things. Even our aero bridges were custom designed, and we bought them off a German company who manufactured them in China, and we ordered initially 6 of them. We ended up getting 12, but we initially ordered 6. And when we started saying, well, we want this bit changed, and we want the glass to be both sides so people can see, and it's really nice, and we actually want air conditioning in the aero bridge for summer and heating for winter. And we had, and then when you put that, we don't want it to be ugly and put on the top of the thing so it sticks out like a sore thumb. We want to design it this way, and the ladder to service that we want, looking so you can't see it. These guys are going like, seriously, you blokes are buying 6 of these things and you care that much about it?
Oh, I love it.
They were selling 200 of the same thing to Beijing Airport. Anyway, what's interesting is all of our custom changes have become their standard high-level specialised product that they sell around the world.
Goodness me, and that's some young blokes from Canberra telling a German company what to do. That would have been an interesting conversation. Tell me...
that's right.
The Gruen transfer. Now, besides being a popular TV show in Australia, it's also, well, before that it was a concept, which, and let me define it for you just in case. It says that the Gruen transfer is the moment when consumers enter a shopping mall and are surrounded by an intentionally confusing layout, lose track of their original intentions, which makes them more susceptible to make impulse buys. So I love that. And I think the Gruen transfer also plays out in casinos where you lose track of time and day. How does the Gruen transfer play out at Canberra Airport?
I suppose we've specifically designed our terminal with the retail in a secondary place that doesn't reflect that. We don't want a confusing environment when people come in. We have a terminal that has probably the least amount of signage of any terminal in Australia, and yet we have the least amount of problems with people finding their way. And that's because it is clear where you need to go. It's the elements you see as you come along. And as I said, it starts when you drive into the terminal precinct, the airport precinct, is you can see the terminal and it's obvious that that beautiful glass frontage is the terminal, where many airports around the world are just obliterated by car parks, even if they've got nice architecture.
I tell you what, you know, Terminal 4 at Tullamarine in Melbourne I still can't find it. It still doesn't come natural to me where I actually have to turn in order to get there. So clearly you've done a lot better job than they have.
And that's the issue then comes into the terminal, and you come into the space and there's this atrium that runs from, you know, where you enter from the car side to the plane side, and it's that defining that space with a very high ceiling and with angles in the design. And, you know, we had the architects Guy de Moseley Brown, who did design Parliament House in Canberra. They won a competition with this design, and, you know, they deserve a huge amount of the credit as well because of the fact that you can find the different ways. We would love there to be more retail at Canberra Airport. Obviously, we're a bit held back because a lot of our travellers are business travellers that are members of the Virgin Lounge or the Qantas Club, and that means that, you know,
don't hang
up there,
around.
the beer and the coffee is well priced. Yeah. So we don't have as much retail as we'd like. But regardless, our retail is there for people to use because it's secondary to the primary thing, which is people getting through easily and quickly, finding their plane, and in our sense, minimising their dwell time at a domestic airport component, where they can, you know, get to the airport late but get their plane on time and be efficient and enjoy the experience.
You must have absolutely, dare I say, wet yourself when you saw that BBC documentary Cities in the Sky on air a few months ago.
Yeah.
It was incredible, wasn't it? For those who haven't seen it, I mean, it basically takes you through the entire behind the scenes of airports and plane building and everything. But boy, oh boy, some of the behind the scenes of those bigger airports like Atlanta and Dubai were quite incredible what goes on. I guess it's a bit like an iceberg. The user only sees a very small component part of it.
That's right. And you know, one of the sadder things, I suppose, about the security environment which we have to operate is you can't easily expose the baggage systems and the complexity of the backroom stuff to people. And it is very impressive. But again, I suppose our opportunity was to start from scratch, to not end up with 15 different levels of add-ons, but to make it sensible and to have infrastructure where it's easy for the airlines to grow. I mean, we will see very, very significant growth at Canberra Airport over the next decade because we're not going to be constrained.
Well, Canberra Airport, you're almost like the Apple of airports at two levels. One is you've managed to find the intersection between beautiful design and wonderful functionality and technology. And the other thing is, like I always say with Apple, computers, I suppose, generally, but particularly with Apple, what you see on the interface is so beautiful and intuitive, but what's going on behind the scenes is just, it's like a duck paddling underwater. And you've managed to find that wonderful intersection. Just to finish on, Stephen, before we get to our 5 quick questions that are completely unrelated to anything we've been speaking about, marketing an airport. The best marketing is, a great product. But what role does marketing play beyond that?
Well, marketing plays an important role in presenting the business opportunity to airlines, and I particularly mean in terms of international airlines. So we had to paint a picture and a marketing position of international flights that would work out of Canberra Airport. We pitched that to a number of airlines, but particularly we eventually got there with Singapore Airlines, and they now fly 4 flights a week to both Singapore and also Wellington. And part of it was explaining not just the airport and the facilities and marketing how easy it would be for them, but the catchment and how the catchment around Canberra is 900,000 people quickly moving towards 1 million, and that it would work. And the proof is in the pudding. The services have been very successfully taken up.
So a lot of the marketing that you would do would be business to business, correct? Going and marketing yourselves, pitching yourselves to the airlines, reminding just what a great airport it is, building the international traveller, etc.?
That's exactly right. So it's sort of business case or business marketing in terms of a business opportunity. And the same is true in terms of low-cost airlines. We have to market to Jetstar and Tiger to come to Canberra Airport. You know, Canberra as a city has a fantastic tourism offering now. It's really being the new gem, the new jewel that's being discovered, and I think part of that is that social media is providing people with an insight into Canberra beyond just the news from Parliament House and the politicians, and they are now seeing how fantastic the place is. And you know, our tourism numbers for domestic travel are only about 9.5% behind Adelaide. And in the last 12 months, we've been growing at 12% per annum. So we're only about a year behind in terms of the number of domestic tourists than Adelaide. We're well ahead of the whole of Tasmania. And we think that now with Tiger Airlines starting services between Canberra and Melbourne in December, that we'll see further growth over the near term and people taking advantage of access to this new tourism product.
Goodness me, what a wonderful set of outcomes. You must look back at that time when your dad said this could be a bit hard and kind of laugh. Well, at least kind of have a smug smile.
Well, I think neither. Well, the laugh now, and it's certainly not smug, is partly that it has taken 18 and a half years to be an overnight success.
Correct. Yeah.
So you know, the things are coming together, and I suppose that's a function of taking that long-term view. But really now it's the opportunity to leverage off what's here, both in the domestic and the low-cost carrier market and then also in international. And I think we'll see more international carriers use Canberra. We don't have a curfew, so you can do the flights overnight. And we're sort of on their radar, whereas before we were, you know, in reality, talkers that were treated as pretenders, but now we're real.
Love it. Stephen, are you ready for your 5 quick questions to finish up on?
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to catch me out on something.
Well, it's not Trivial Pursuit, but here's the first one. What are you curious about?
Where society is going to end up for my children in an era of social media and the positive and negative impacts of that.
God, don't even get me started.
Sorry.
I could stop there. Well, I'm fathering 3 teenagers, and my listeners know how I feel about that. But, yeah, I'm with you there. Sweet or savoury? And what dish?
It's a bit savoury flavour, but really it's as sophisticated as high-quality horseradish with a very good steak.
No, horseradish, one of the most overrated flavours on the earth. But hey, what would I know? What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Don't sweat the small stuff. You've got to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, right. And you certainly have at Canberra Airport. What's one thing you wish you were an expert on right now?
See how long it'll take for there to be more growth in international. So I think you still want to be able to look to the future and know where it's going to end up. Because we never do. Crystal ball.
And finally, when were your parents most disappointed with you?
Oh, that's a tough question. When I let them down by doing the wrong thing.
Oh, yeah? What was that? Which one?
Breaching their trust. That's just, you know, not doing the right thing, having a party at home when they weren't around.
Oh, yeah, we've all done that. And I've got, as again, 3 teenagers. I'm living that right now. Stephen Byron, thank you for sharing some wonderful insights from what is now a big business that was once small. And there's a lot of inspiration to be taken from what you've done with Canberra Airport. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very generous.
Well, there you go, team. Stephen Byron, owner of Canberra Airport. Geez, I was a bit harsh on the old horseradish, wasn't I? Mind you, not a big fan at all. Coming up, I share my top 3 attention grabbers from that fireside chat with Stephen. But first, here's a word from 2 businesses that want to help build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it deserves to be. Support for this show comes from Key Person of Influence, the world's leading business accelerator program for those wanting to be an industry thought leader. Their 5-step KPI method teaches you how to nail your pitch, publish content, productise your offer, raise your profile and partner with performers. I asked co-founder Glenn Carlson, what's with the pee fetish?
Oh, yeah, I suppose it is a bit of a fetish, isn't it? Mate, I guess we're just a bit obsessed. You know, fetishes, obsessions, we're just business geeks, mate. We believe there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, and we're all in. We are just all in. And if we find best practices and ideas as a result of what's working for our clients all around the world, we just want to bring it to people. And so far, the best framework that we've found to be able to do that, to really accelerate that entrepreneurial journey in the shortest time, is the 5 Ps. So, mate, get in on the fetish.
KPI, where fetishes rule. For a free hard or audio copy of their Amazon bestseller, visit keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. Oh, and a little warning, don't read it before bed. You just won't sleep. Support for this show comes from Web Central, who love building small businesses' websites that not only look great, but get you more customers. I asked Verity Ma, their Chief Marketing Officer, to share her top 3 business website must-haves that are simply non-negotiable.
The 3 must-haves for an effective website, I think, starts with a clear call to action. So when you get a visitor to that website, what do you want them to do? Also, the website needs to be mobile friendly because there's a huge growth in the number of visitors coming from their mobile, searching while they're out and about. And then finally, a professional design that reflects your brand. Because if you think about it, the first time that a potential client or customer interacts with your brand is on your website, they're going to have an immediate view of what your website does and whether you're trustworthy.
Web Central, helping you build trust online fast. Check out webcentral.com.au/Timbo for exclusive listener offers. All right, here is what grabbed my attention from that fireside chat with Stephen Byron of Canberra Airport. Number 1, I love his focus on user friendliness. I mean, what business shouldn't have a focus on that? No matter whether you're selling to consumers, to other businesses, it doesn't matter. A focus on user friendliness is paramount. Tom O'Toole, in a previous episode, talked about it. I think his question was, would you buy it? You know, that's a good question. Dom Holland from tow.com.au, T-O-W, he talked about with his website, everyone's coming to your website for one thing, give it to them up front. That's user friendliness. So I guess the question is, how can you and your business be more user friendly focused? And go about implementing some ideas that come from that question. Attention grabber number 2, dream the outcome, then work backwards. Love that. Hey? Very Michael Gerber-esque, wouldn't you say? In that interview I did with him recently, talking about going from a company of 1 to a company of 1,000. Start with the dream. In fact, his first step is the dream room. Remember that? Go back and listen to that episode. Absolute cracker. Still getting talked about. Attention grabber number 3, here to help. I like that. How it appears on all staff uniforms. Help being the operative word. That's why I wrote a book about helpful marketing. Helpful marketing works, right? Are you being helpful in your marketing? Stephen and his team have gone to the extreme of saying on their uniforms, we're here to help. But I really like that. And if you want to buy the book, smallbusinessbigmarketing.com is where you'll find it. I'd also love to know what grabbed your attention in that interview. So head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/341 and let me know. What else have we got, team? Let me see. What's this button do?
Have you got to lose?
Oh, that's a good button. I like that button. It means it's time to share one simple yet effective marketing idea that you can implement immediately. One that won't cost a fortune, if anything, and it might generate you more sales. I like that. Today's idea is to play Big Brother and watch where your website visitors go. You know, you can learn a lot about your prospects and the effectiveness of your website without actually having to talk to your prospects. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't go out and seek feedback from people eye to eye, face to face. You should, absolutely. But there are also other strategies and methods you can use to gain the insight you need to make the right changes for your business, right? One such way is by using monitoring tools to track how people use your website. Doing so gives you the opportunity to gather incredibly helpful, actionable data without having to bother your prospects. And you know what they say, you can't manage what you don't measure. So here's my 3 steps to implementing this tip. Number 1, create an account on crazyegg.com, which is a tool that allows you to track hot zones on your website. A hot zone's like a heat map, that illustrates what people click on and what they ignore. Step 2, once you've got that Crazy Egg account, use it to collect data about your website. Remember, your goal is to determine if there are any changes you can make that can help boost website conversions. This is not complicated, I promise. Go and check out Crazy Egg. It will become very clear. Step 3, interpret the results and make any necessary changes to your website in order to attempt to influence your visitors and boost conversions. Now, here's the pro tip, team. Never stop doing this once you start. It becomes a bit of a rinse and repeat process. So you can make the changes to your website, give it a few weeks, then go back and look at the Crazy Egg data again. You with me? As always, there will be links in the show notes to the resources I mentioned. You can head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/341. Plus, I'll also include over there an example of a website heat map generated by Crazy Egg. Hey, if you'd like help implementing any of the ideas you hear in this What Have You Got to Lose segment, go ahead and join the Small Business Big Marketing Club, where I will personally support you on your marketing journey. So, what have you got to lose? Okay, that almost wraps up another episode of the Small Business Big Marketing Show. Plenty of marketing gold coming your way in the weeks and months ahead. Don't you worry about that. Hey, a while back I chatted with Jim Penman. He's the Jim in Jim's Mowing, that classic Aussie brand. Here he is sharing his view on marketing.
Advertising as such is to me almost a trivial part of marketing. The vast majority of our work actually comes from people knowing about us, people hearing about us, people who used us before, people who see us driving by, people who know somebody who's used us. People who focus too much on advertising, I think it's a bad mistake. I overwhelmingly, 98% of my attention would be on the experience people have after they call us. And I'm endlessly pushing that. And I'm not always very popular either. I push people a lot.
Jim shared some absolute gold in that chat, including his very rigid approach to inbound and outbound calling. In fact, he was in the Jim's Mowing dedicated call centre during that chat. To hear my full interview with him, plus hundreds more, head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com, or I would love you to subscribe free on iTunes. Hey, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, tim@timreid, reid.com.au. Tell me feedback, comments, something you'd like improved on the show, deleted, I don't know. I got a thick skin. Or you can hit me up on Twitter, Timbo Reid. Now, be sure to grab a free hard copy of the Key Person of Influence book over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. But only, and I mean only, if you want to become more visible, valued and connected in your industry. And remember, you now know 3 things your website must do in order to be effective. They're not overly complicated, but probably require a little bit of time to implement. So why not hand that responsibility over to Web Central? You can check out their 3 exclusive listener packages over at webcentral.com.au/Timbo. Hey, if you love the show, tell another 1 or 10 or 50 small business owners that you know about it. Until next week, I'm Timbo Reid. Thanks for listening to the Small Business Big Marketing Show. May your marketing be the best marketing. Bye for now.